Welcome to Slackin Off with Brady Slack.
Welcome to another episode of Slackin Off. I'm your host, Brady Slack. I'm excited for today's episode. I just want everyone to know that. So, Scott Reib is America's business attorney, right? And I don't say that with like any disregard for the title. He's worked with Ziglar. He's worked with hundreds of different entrepreneurs all across the country. I'm excited to dive into his business model because it's very different than what we're typically used to with attorneys. But I met Scott. We both presented and talked at a mastermind event probably about a year and a half ago, give or take.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
And I personally, we've been using Scott for the last little bit. I've been extremely impressed with the way that he handles his business, the way that we handle our legal matters. I feel very protected. I'm excited to kind of dive into this and understand for a lot of my clients and for a lot of those that listen, what things we should be looking out for from a legal perspective. But I don't want to butcher anything else. So Scott, welcome to the show and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Brady, thanks for having me on. This is going to be fun. We've known each other now. It's probably been 2 years. I think
Close
it was
to it,
September of 21. There in outside of Salt Lake. So, I'm a business attorney. I'm a family guy. I mean, I've been married 32 years. Got 2 boys. One is 21, finishing up school at Dallas Baptist University, and I have a 25-year-old who's married. Lives in Tulsa, and he's a tax analyst and working on a master's in accounting. And so we have a pretty busy life, but I have a really fun law firm because we get to be a part of all these entrepreneurial journeys like yours, and we get to help people grow, build, and scale these businesses in a protected way, and got a pretty great life.
No grandkids yet, though.
No, not yet.
Okay.
I'm sure I think we're not far away from it, but with them in school and working full time, we're waiting to get out of school first.
All right. My mom always says she's glad she has grandkids because they're way better than having kids. So
that's what I've heard.
Well, so I want to dive into a little bit about your career because I think your career is pretty interesting. You've worked with some pretty amazing individuals from the entrepreneurial, the business coaching space. And how you operate your law firm is not always how you operated your law firm. And I want to dive into that and why it's unique and why it's beneficial to the entrepreneur like me. But why law? How did that career kind of progress and transform? And talk a little bit about some of the people that you've worked with, like Zig Ziglar.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, 30 plus years ago, I really wanted to be an advertising and marketing executive. And that was my degree. Got out of school in 91, and there were no jobs for that. If you said you wanted to do that, then they told you that they would offer you a sales job selling copiers or phone systems. And so that's what I ended up doing. And I was selling phone systems for a major telecom carrier and had a really good deal going, had figured out some ways to use their systems to generate some mailbox money. They loved how I was doing it. But a new manager came in and decided that they would take that away from me and give it to an hourly wage person, so they didn't have to pay the commissions on it. And in my opinion, breached my contract. But they did it. There wasn't much I could do about it because there was unequal leverage. And so I did what every sane person would do. I went to law school. I have a brother-in-law that had just finished up law school, and so I kind of got to see him do it and how he paid for it, and it kind of opened my eyes. I was super blessed. My parents were able to pay for my college, and so I didn't have to deal with the student loans and things that some people had to deal with. And so I didn't know that you could use student loans to go to law school. I had no clue. And so when I figured that out, I'm like, okay, because when I was younger, it was a career path that kind of interested me. I grew up in a smaller town, and the couple of lawyers that were there were very respected and well thought of. And I thought, well, that might be a good career path. Yeah. And so when that change happened, I thought, I'm going to go back to school and get some more tools because there's no jobs right now. So let's just go get some more tools. So law made sense to me. I took the LSAT, did well enough to get into the University of Oklahoma, and in the fall of '94 started law school. And law school was great. It's hard until you figure it out. It's like business. Once you create some systems for it, it's not so hard anymore. And so I created some systems, went through law school, had a good time, played a lot of basketball with the guys, and we were broke, but we had a pretty good time. And then in '96, I got my first law job working for a litigation firm in Sherman, Texas, and we were doing really high-end intellectual property litigation in federal courts, and it was really boring. Really boring. I'd be on phone conference calls for hours at a time with engineers, not understanding anything they're talking about, billing the client hundreds of dollars an hour, and just didn't feel like I was helping anyone. And so I kind of started trying to find, what do I like to do? And everything that I did with small business owners made a lot more sense to me. The first business thing I did was the firm had a client that was it was an ambulance firm, and they were having a dispute with another ambulance company on territory. And so I kind of got to know the grandson of the owners and found out they wanted to sell, and worked out a deal where they would let me sell the ambulance company, and I would get a percentage of whatever I got for them. And so I pulled in the senior partners and said, here's the deal. And they said, great. And then we went and sold the ambulance company, and the firm made some money. I didn't make a lot of money, but the firm made some money. And I felt like I really helped this family business. And it just kind of clicked that that's the kind of stuff I want to do.
I think law always kind of it's always interested me. And I considered becoming a lawyer until I actually had to serve jury duty while I was in college. And I got into the courtroom, and I felt like the attorneys were just nasty people trying to sway based on different facts. But law has always interested me, only because that there's a truth. When you actually look at the law, here's what is written and here's how it should be determined. But with accounting and law, it's always interesting. Like, someone will come to me and say, hey, you're an accountant, so you can do X, Y, or Z, not realizing that there's 50 different things you can do as an accountant. And I feel like law is the same. Hey, you're an attorney, so you can do X, Y, Z, but really there's an attorney for mergers, acquisitions. There's an attorney for divorce. There's an attorney for family law, and it's crazy to see how many different types of attorneys there are.
Yes. And I have been doing this 26 years and have done all different kinds of things. Which is very helpful when I'm advising entrepreneurs that are going through all these different things. Sometimes I'm not the expert that can do all the work, but I understand it well enough to bring another expert, like you said, mergers and acquisitions, bring that person on. Or if it's litigation, I bring in a litigator and say, hey, here's what's going on. I need you to take this for my client. And then I just work with them to make sure that they're getting what they need from the client, and the client understands what's going on. And because of my experience, I've tried several lawsuits to juries, most recently about a year ago. And so I just got some experience that's very helpful in that journey. Plus I haven't been a W-2 employee since 1997. After that, I've always been an owner of a law firm in some way. And so I've had to learn how to run these businesses and go without paychecks. That was a real shock the first time that happened as an owner. And it's a different world. I think it's much better than being employed. People see the stability of jobs. I've never seen that. I've seen too many people after 25, 30 years lose jobs. Yeah. But it would be very hard for me to lose everything that I've got. And if it did, I know how to do other things to build it to make money now. So it's just kind of freeing. But that's kind of been my journey. And along the way, I figured out the system's kind of broken. I mean, if you're listening and you haven't ever had to hire a lawyer, that's great.
Lucky
but most
you.
lawyers work but most lawyers work by the hour. Yeah. And when it comes down to it, they're really working in 6-minute increments. And so every phone call, every email, is say $50 to $75, depending on the hourly rate. Well, people don't like that.
Yeah.
And what was happening was my business clients were not calling me before they'd make a big decision, or a decision that ended up being big, because they just felt like money was flying out of their pocket. So they'd flip a coin, Google it, dial a friend, make a decision, and then it'd go bad. Then they'd come in and ask me to fix it. It cost way too much money to fix it. And then they're kind of disenchanted and go away and
Yeah.
make more mistakes. And so in 2012, I kind of had this vision for an on-demand system where entrepreneurs like me could ask all the questions they want to ask for a set monthly fee and never have to worry about getting, gouged in big bills. And I'd seen some business coaches start coming up and they're charging this monthly fee. And I'm like, why couldn't I do that? And so I hired my first business coach and said, hey, here's my vision. Can you give me a map? If it's not A to Z, at least can you get me to K? And I worked with the accountant Clay Clark out of Tulsa. He was great. And we created what is now known as the Access Plan. And we've been doing that for 12 years and providing that's on-demand service to entrepreneurs like Brady. And it's changed everything.
I want to go back to one thing that you talked about because, and I'll preface the question with a little story. About 2 years ago, we were onboarding a client, and during the onboarding, this client had asked me a question I never been asked before. She asked me what I invested my money into, what businesses I owned, and what I was doing with my money. And the reason that she asked me that was that she was told by a business coach that she should never work with someone that isn't doing or trying to do what they were trying to do. And I find that that's an interesting question because there's a lot of accountants who have never owned a business. They might never own a business and they don't know what their business clients are going through, right? And I think attorneys are the same way. There's a lot of attorneys who they might make partner, but they don't know what running a business is like. They've never ran a business and they don't know what difficulties business owners come up to. And I think that's what makes me and my business partner Mike so different than a lot of other accountants is we're doing it. Not only do we own the accounting firm and this is a business, but we have other businesses and other investments that we partake in. Do you think that that alone, because you'd been a business owner and you'd owned multiple firms, do you think that also helps set you apart from other attorneys in the marketplace?
Yeah, I think a lot of lawyers don't understand the journey at all. If you're in a bigger firm, whether it's a accounting firm or law firm, there's always plenty of work. Everyone's getting paid. There might be some layoffs or something, or downsizing, but generally everyone gets paid. Mm-hmm. And the firms that I've been a part of, where the biggest firm was 4 lawyers, 4 partners, There were times where, and this I can remember, this was probably, I want to say June of 2000, 2001 maybe. The senior partners called me into their office and they said, hey, there's not going to be any paychecks this week because we don't have any money after we've paid. We're going to pay we can pay the other employees, but we don't have any money for partners' draws. And I'm like, what? You guys told me I was going to get a draw. Well, yeah, but there's no money. And so I realized really quickly that I needed to find some ways to generate revenue quickly to help with the firm, and so because otherwise I wasn't going to pay my bills, and I had to go get my first line of credit to make sure that I could pay my bills and do things like that. And then other firms I would be in charge of doing more of the books and keeping track of numbers and the data and seeing how important all that stuff is. It really was educational, and seeing the ups and downs of it, I think it makes me different, and I'm just kind of wired that way. Like I'm always looking for different ways to do things, and so even inside other firms, I've been very entrepreneurial.
So the second part that I want to highlight has to do with how you currently have structured your attorney firm. I'm rapping on the accounting industry, so I'm going to apologize. I'm not going to apologize to any accountant that's currently listening. But one of the things that I don't understand about accountants is why do they bill at an hourly rate? Like the problem that I've had in the past billing at hourly rates is clients don't want to use you for the services because they feel like, shoot, every time I go call Brady, I'm just going to have to spend money. And so, they go make decisions on their own. Oftentimes, then they come back to us because something went wrong and then we have to fix it, which ends up costing them more money and they get a bad taste in their mouth. And so in the accounting industry, what's happening is there's a lot of accountants that are switching to monthly fees. Here's what's included in the monthly fee. And if you need anything, come get us. It's unlimited access for this monthly fee. And I was very impressed when we started to talk, a year and a half, 2 years ago. And you said, yeah, we do the same thing. We don't do hourly rates. It's a monthly fee. You pay the monthly fee. Here's what you get. If you need anything above this, then, there's some additional fees. And I was taken aback because I know like other accountants do it, but I didn't know other attorneys do it. And to this day, I still don't know that there's a whole lot of attorneys that do what you do. Have you seen any other attorneys that just charge, here's your monthly fee and here's the services included in that monthly fee?
There are a few. I've helped a few do it since I started, and then I've run into a few. I was in a mastermind, gosh, I want to say 5 years ago, with some other lawyers, where a lawyer was teaching lawyers how to do this. They were doing it in a little different. Like, they were charging pretty high monthly rates, trying to have, the goal of having maybe 10 clients, and that's it. And that wasn't appealing to me at that time. I already had my system in place and had 50 plus clients paying me, and our fee structure's low. It's gone up over the years. I mean, there's been inflation, right? So it's gone up a little bit as we've gotten better at it, and I think we're providing more value. It's gone up a little bit, but it ranges from $650 a month to $32.50 a month. And because I want to be able to actually help real entrepreneurs that are really out there, kind of that bootstrapping it, and if I'm thousands of dollars for everybody, then I can't help them. And so we've tried to keep it in a budget friendly way, affordable, but where we can still put enough value in it. And, what the number one rule in business is, charge more than it costs for your service than it costs to produce it. And so we've been able to do it in a profitable way. But it's there's very few doing it. I don't know why there aren't more. But if you want to do it, call me. I think it's a real blue ocean because people are so sick and tired of doing it the other way. And now I get calls from people wanting to hear about, our subscription program.
Yeah.
10 years ago, no one knew what that was. They weren't looking for it. And so I really was kind of having to create a market for what we were doing because people didn't know they needed it. And so it grew a lot more slowly than I thought it would, but dramatically slower. I mean, it's been, I thought in the first year I would have 100 clients. It took me 10 plus years.
Well, so I kind of have two questions. The first question is, again, follow-up questions. The first question, from a business perspective, do you feel like you as a business make more or less money offering a subscription-based service rather than billing hourly?
I don't, it's not a yes or no answer. I think I make a good living doing it. We make good money. I could make more money if I was willing to trade time for dollars and work a lot more hours, for sure. But like you, my time with my family is very important.
Yeah.
And I have always prioritized that. When my boys were growing up, there were times where I was coaching 2 or 3 soccer teams at a time. I mean, I was leaving the office at 3:30 or 4 to go to the soccer fields and coach. And the hourly model doesn't work real well when you do that.
Yeah.
But if you're providing a value in exchange for a dollar amount, then it works a lot better. And so by doing the subscription model, and then we also do flat fee packages. If someone comes in and they're like, hey, we need to buy a business. Okay, great. Tell us about it. And then we give you a flat fee price for
due diligence,
negotiating it, documenting it, helping to do all that stuff. Right. But it's a flat fee. It's no number, and we're not billing you by the hour, so you can budget for it. And so it's been really a pleasant surprise to see that we can make money. I mean, I've been able to generate 7 figures for the law firm with a very small footprint.
Well, you mentioned earlier, even when you were in school, talking about the processes and the system to help you get through school. I've noticed that because we offer the same, very similar pricing models where everything's monthly, the more processes and systems and repeatable, operations that we implement in our business only make our service more profitable with less time because the system and the process is doing that. And I would imagine it would be the same for you. Well, I wouldn't imagine. I know because I
It is.
partake in that it's the same for you.
Yes. And and it's a constant evolution of
Yeah.
us, of me trying to find ways to make it better for you, the clients, and for me trying to make the delivery of the service better for my team. And how can I make their jobs easier by providing better tools, better automation, so that they can focus on the things that they really want to do, and not some of the just the just the more rudimentary tasks that you just have to do over and over again. And we're at a really cool time, I think, with technology, because there's just so much out there to make firms like ours work even more efficiently.
Yeah.
So it's pretty fun. I like, we go to weekly team meetings, and we'll spend some of it talking about you, our clients, and projects that are working, and any questions people have. But most of the meetings we're now spending on how can we do this better? Let's brainstorm. What are some problem areas you see? Where is there a problem that we're running into where you're not getting the answer you need for the client? Sometimes it's because of me, and then we have to figure out how do we get Scott out of the way.
Yeah, a lot of the time it's, hey, Brady, get out of the way so we can just work. That's what it is.
Yeah. And so it's turned it into more of a business. I mean, it's a profession, but we run this just like everyone, all the listeners are running their businesses. We're trying to figure out the most profitable way to do it, right? I want to either be able to retire or slow down someday.
Yeah.
And so to do that, the firm has to generate more money than it needs to operate, so that I can retire, and so that my team members can sometime retire, and we can bring new people on that can run it with good systems that are easy to follow and implement.
Yep. Yeah. No, I mean, we're having a law conversation, but that was just very basic business practice. The more you can systematize a business, the better off you are to be able to have a good exit strategy, whether it's a cash flow or you sell it.
Yep.
The other question that I want to ask, and I think this one will be I think we'll go a little bit down this rabbit hole with this question, but you talked a little bit about with this hourly rate and clients not working with an attorney, maybe because they don't know what they need. What are some, like, I want to kind of dive into it more from an attorney law perspective.
Mm-hmm.
What are the most common, maybe 3 to 5 most common things that you see from a liability or a law perspective that entrepreneurs are missing out on?
Yeah, the first thing is just kind of the basic business structure. We call it a shatterproof blueprint, where we're figuring out what is the right business structure for you with LLCs, corporations, whatever they are. How do you set them up? We'll do an illustration so that you can see where everything fits, how the money flows, and we always do that in conjunction with an accountant, so that we can make sure that it's a tax efficient way to run it, because the way you keep score in business is with the money. So we always make sure that works. So that's the big thing that they do, is they're not doing that. Some people are still running as sole proprietors. I still run into that. And so one entity is better than no entities, but sometimes you need to have multiple depending on what you're doing. And so getting that structure right is one of the big things that we see. Another thing that we see is people aren't protecting their brand names. And so they've started a business. It's a little bit successful. They're getting some traction, and they get 2 or 3 years down the road, and then they get a cease and desist letter and say, hey, you can't use that name. We have it trademarked. And because they just got busy in their entrepreneurial seizure, they didn't protect it. And it's really not a hard thing to do to file a trademark application. It really should be secure your name with your LLC or corporation at the state level. And then immediately after that, figure out if you can trademark it. And you file an application with the United States Patent and Trademark Office, let it run through the system. Sometimes they'll reject it, and then you have to go back to the drawing board. But you'd much rather know that early on in your business than years later. I've had people 10, 15 years into multi-million-dollar businesses having to cross their fingers and hope they can get their trademark, because if not, they're going to spend a lot of money and lose a lot of traction rebranding. And so that would be the second. The third is contracts. They are either signing contracts that haven't been reviewed, and so there's huge risk there, or they're creating contracts on their own without any legal guidance to use in their business, or they're just doing handshake deals, which is even worse. And so those are kind of the things what I kind of call it the low-hanging fruit, that we're able to jump in with all of our clients and just take that off the plate. Like, okay, we're going to take care of your structure. We're going to take care of your brand. We're going to take care of your contracts, so you can go out and make money and be confident that what you're doing is not going to crumble. And so those are kind of the major issues that we see over and over again.
So if you're okay with it, I want to kind of dive into each one of these and talk about them for a little bit. Is that okay?
Sure. You bet.
With entity structures, now clients typically come to me, the accountant, before they ever go approach an attorney and say, hey, what I'm doing X, Y, or Z. What entity should I set up? Or can you help me set up an entity? Okay. And the first thing I want people to know is CPA also stands for cannot protect assets. Okay. Like I can help you register, I can help you get an EIN, but it's not going to do me any good because the living documents of the business need to be done by an attorney. Right.
That's right.
Now, as far as business entity structure goes, most simply for listeners, right? And then I'm going to get your input, Scott. We typically structure businesses based on whether or not the activity is active or passive, and whether you have assets that are in the business. Active income is typically recommended to be done through an LLC that is taxed as an S corporation, or a C corporation that is taxed as an S corporation. On one side of the aisle, this would be consulting, operational businesses, fix and flips, being an attorney, being an accountant, whatever that might be, right? Or you're going into a partnership with someone, say a window washing company. The member of that LLC should be an S corporation. Okay, that's kind of one side of the aisle. The other side of the aisle is passive, rental real estate. I'm investing into syndications or funds. Maybe I create a holdings entity that's an LLC, and then from there I can either have a holding structure and create single member LLCs for each of my rental properties, or X, Y, or Z. Tell me, is that right? Is that wrong? What would you change? Let's dive into that.
It's definitely not wrong. You're dividing it more, with your accounting mind.
I'm tax.
Tax. So what I would look at is I want to have everything in silos, especially if they're, especially when there's assets. But I even want to keep the active income thing in its own silo so that it can't be affected by other things that you're doing. So if you're driving through the countryside and you see silos of grain, there's always each type of grain's in its own silo, and so each type of business should be in its own silo, and assets shouldn't be in the companies that are operating. They should be in their own silo. And so that would be one thought about it. The other thing I like to do is use states that have good anonymity and protection, so that it's not easy to figure out who owns those companies. And so we'll use Nevada, Delaware, New Mexico's kind of coming on. Wyoming's a big player in that. And we use those to form at least the top level of the company. You referred to it as a holdings company. We'll often call it a family holding company. And sometimes you'll have multiple of those to have further silos. But that family holding company then owns your other things that you do. So there's a layer of protection between you and your businesses. And by doing that, you're protecting yourself from your business, and you're protecting your business from yourself. Because we create personal liability all the time. I mean, I had a car wreck 3 weeks ago. Thankfully, everyone's okay. It was my fault, and created some property damage. If that had gone the other way and been catastrophic, and I had hurt someone really badly, that liability would have an effect on my business if I don't have a buffer between me and the business, with an LLC that can't be attacked with a judgment from outside. And so you've got to look at your asset protection from both directions. And by doing that holding company on top, you do that. And sometimes it's overkill. I had a meeting just yesterday with some new clients. They're forming a new business. And I'm like, hey, here in the perfect world's what I would do. And I start drawing it out. I'm like, but I'm a big believer in crawling, walking, and running. So we're
Yeah.
not going to form 5 LLCs next week. We're going to form one. And we're going to see if you can actually get a customer like you think you can.
Yeah.
And then once you're making a little bit of money, then we can talk about, okay, now let's take the next step and start forming some of the more protection that you need around it. But I love the way you divided it up into active, passive. I need to start talking about it in those senses. But like you're the tax guy. I only play a tax lawyer on TV, and so I try to really stay away from that. And one reason we do a lot of illustrations and diagrams is because then I can give that to the client. They can take it to you, and you can walk through it or jump on a call with me. And it's like, this is how I see it. What do you see? And then we can tweak it to get it where it covers both the tax side and the asset protection side.
Yeah. Now, full disclosure to those listening, like some of these questions might sound a little teed up, but Scott and I have worked together, so we understand how each other kind of do things anyways, right? With the entity structures. Right. And now so another question that I get asked a lot it has to do with the Delaware, Nevada, Wyoming entity, right? Now, don't get me wrong, for some of our businesses, they're registered in Delaware. There's a purpose behind that. But besides the anonymity and the fact that like Delaware has lots of history with corporate law, are there any other reasons why an individual would want to use a Nevada, Wyoming, or Delaware entity?
Yeah, you want to have your, especially that top level company in a state that has really strong charging order law. And to simplify that, if someone gets a judgment against you personally, then they take that judgment and they're going to file it and try to go attack your LLC interest. If you're in a state like Wyoming, Delaware, Nevada, they can't do anything, but they have this order that says if you distribute profits, I get it. Mm-hmm. Well, we can go to people like Brady and they can show us all kinds of ways to get money out of our entities without distributing profit in the traditional way. And so they get starved out and they go away. But if you're in a state that has weak charging order laws or no charging order laws, then they can come straight through that LLC, seize your membership interest, sell all the assets, take all the money, and you're done. And so if possible and practical, I like to have it in those states. Texas, where I sit right now, we have pretty good laws, but in my opinion, they're not as strong as Wyoming's. Delaware is strong also. It's kind of expensive to file and operate there. And so generally, if it's not a company that you're going to raise some capital for, and it's going to be, you're going to be raising millions of dollars in funds to start it, I don't usually recommend Delaware. It has great, like you said, great precedent to rely on, but it's just so expensive to operate. States like Wyoming and New Mexico are really inexpensive and easy to work with. And so we generally go there. Just kind of on the side, the difficulty that you'll run into when you do this is banking. It can be very difficult to open the bank account when you're not in Wyoming or New Mexico or Delaware.
A physical presence.
Yeah. And so I've found an online bank that will do that. And so if anyone wanted to know who that was, they could reach out to me on Instagram, for instance, at the Scott Reib, and I would be glad to provide that information to you. But it can be difficult, and so some people have these entities and they're like, "Wait, how do I get a bank account?" And it can be a little bit frustrating because they've heard me or something on a YouTube or Instagram video suggesting it, and they go, "Well, I'm gonna go do it," and then they get it and they're like, "Well, great, now I can't open a bank account."
I want to make sure that people hear me loud and clear, because we've had some clients that we've acquired who get into a situation where they go set up a Nevada, Wyoming, Delaware entity, and then they think, okay, great, Wyoming and Delaware don't have any state income tax, so I don't have to pay any state income tax. Like this is not a tax conversation. This is an entity structure conversation. You are still going to pay taxes in the state within which you are living or operating your businesses, or business, or states that you're operating your business in. And I want to make sure that that's very loud and clear.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, as far as entities, the other question with entities that we get a lot of times, and I have my opinion, but I'd be interested to hear yours. When does a trust come into play? Again, trusts oftentimes are not tax saving vehicles. They are
Yeah.
asset protection tools. I want to make sure that that's very clear. But when does a trust come into play? When do you talk about trusts, or do you talk about the estate planning with clients?
Yeah, that's it's a part of early conversations because everything that you and I just talked about needs to be held by a trust. And there's two main categories of trust: what I'm going to call living or revocable trusts, and then irrevocable trust. Uh, Easiest way to think about them, for me at least, is these are just boxes that can hold assets.
Hmm.
The living trust has a lid that's open, and so you can put things in, take things out. You can control it. It's really you, but it's got this estate planning mechanism so that you don't have an estate. Everything's in the box, and then the other box, once you put everything in, the lid closes, and you can't take anything in or out. It runs by the rules, so you can either get income or principal out of it according to the rules at the discretion of the trustee, and so it's really restrictive and really only used for high net worth individuals that are trying to protect assets that they're going to have long term, and don't need access to the principal. Income would be fine. And so what we usually work with our clients are living trusts. And so I can't require it, but if I could, I would. Everyone that we work with should have one because we're in a probate right now for a real nice lady who she and her husband had a company that they owned jointly, and because they didn't have a trust set up,
Hmm.
and they didn't have a will either. But it's been a very difficult probate trying to transfer all the assets, and one of the assets we have to deal with is the LLC interests. And so if you have those held by a trust, then the trustee just transfers them. It doesn't go through a court. You don't need someone in a black bathrobe to say yes, you can do that. But if you don't have it, then everything that you own is going to go through a probate court in some state, or maybe multiple states if you own stuff in different places. And so, if you're a business owner and have any family that you care anything about, then you really should have a trust, because otherwise you're going to leave them with a real mess to unwind, even more than just your business. Because that in itself can be a real problem. Because
Yeah.
I mean, my wife stays home, has for years. She knows what I do, but if she had to come try to figure all this out, it would be a mess. I've got an assistant that's been with me for a long time, and she knows where everything is and what we do. But my wife would have trouble with that, and so
Yeah.
you need to have some plans in place, like a trust. You need to have insurance policies in place, so there's funding to carry on if you're disabled or if you die, so that there's funds to keep your business running while your family figures out how to transition it. It's a little deeper than you wanted me to go, but that's
No, that was great. Only because, again, eh, entity structure is something that is so commonly, it's very common that is done incorrectly, and very few people have entered into the realm of estate planning or trust conversations. So no, that was really good. The next piece that you talked about was kind of this IP trademark idea. I think
yeah.
in the last 5 years, lots of people have gotten into the influencer, internet marketing, social media craze kind of deal,
Mhm.
which I think is important because lots of people are making money from online sales and
Mhm.
influencing and advertising and marketing and affiliate work. But at what point, I guess my question would be, at what point should someone trademark their name, image, or likeness, we'll call it, for that monetary gain? When does it make sense for someone to do that? I guess what's the common fallacy that you see from an attorney's perspective?
Well, from my perspective, it should really be step 1B. 1A is you form your company and get your name, and once you've done that, then that's going to be your brand. Then you should trademark it. It's a very small investment to file that application, and just so you know, that's a brand that you can build on. Now, your brand may shift and change over the years, but that's okay. You've taken the step to protect it. So it really should happen at that beginning stage of let's file it. Now, the second part of that question that you didn't ask was, because you've got this name, like we're Reib Law, but I also have a logo.
Mm.
My logo has changed a lot over the last 26 years.
Yeah.
So you kind of want to wait a little bit on the logo and make sure you've got it like you want it. And so that's something that you might wait till year 2 or 3 until you've got your logo like you're like, okay, because I mean, everyone's a graphic designer now in some way with all the tools we have. And so you're constantly tweaking your logo. And so wait a little bit on that, but secure the name, know that you can build it, because if not, what happens is you get to the top of that ladder and you've built your business on someone else's brand, and you could end up in a real bind, not just having to rebrand, but you could actually be hauled into court and have to pay them some of the profit that they allege you took from them by using their name. So do it early, as early as possible. I know that there's not unlimited funds, and you have to be careful with what you're doing. Find a lawyer that does trademarks that will do it at a reasonable rate, and just at least get one classification for your lockdown for your business, and then you can always add more as you grow. But it's just so important. I've just seen too many people over the last 10 years have to rebrand because they just skipped it.
I'm curious to know what would you consider like reasonable? What does something like that cost? What should someone be looking at for that?
Between $1,000 and $2,000 is reasonable.
Okay.
There's some. It looks like, I mean, there's places on the internet where you can go and try to do it yourself, and I'm not going to say you couldn't do it successfully. You could, but when we file trademark applications, we get a lot of responses back called office actions that you then have to work with the trademark examiner. There's some nuance involved in how you write the applications, and so, in my opinion, I don't do my own teeth. I don't work on my own car. I pay someone to do that stuff, and so as long as it's a reasonable rate and I'm getting good value for it, then I'll use someone else. And so with trademarks, for sure, I would get someone that knows what they're doing to write that application for you.
Well, it's the same with a business entity. You can go register a business entity yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You can go get an EIN yourself. But then if you don't do the operating agreement, or you don't, set up your board meetings, or if you don't have company, like a lot of that could be detrimental to the business.
Yep.
You kind of miss out on that corporate veil. So I think it's the same idea.
Yeah.
Third thing you talked about was contracts. And I actually, I'm glad you said this one. So last week, I was actually helping represent. I got asked to provide some information as a witness to a client of ours who is going through court. They got sued by a former contractor, and their contracts were not done very correct, in my opinion. But that's what they were arguing was this contract that the individual, our client, he found online, and he did. And luckily there were some other things that played into fact, and the client won this specific suit. But contracts, it's a big one, and we just got done with you reviewing all of our contracts for the couple different companies that we have you represent. And it's a doozy. Sometimes it can be pretty daunting to go through contracts. So what are some tips? What are some ideas that you have for entrepreneurs to help with this? Or I guess, what contracts should an entrepreneur have in place for different situations?
You should have some kind of a contract that you're using with your customers, some sort of an agreement. It doesn't have to be super complicated, but it needs to be in writing so that it's clear what you're providing them. If there's something that you're specifically not providing, it needs to say clearly what they're not getting, what the terms of payment are, what happens if they don't pay. Some clear things like that in a written agreement. And there's things that because of my education and training experience, I know to look for, to just put in every agreement, that if you're a layperson, you're just not going to know. Have those reviewed by a lawyer. I mean, I can give you a whole system for how to create your own contracts, which is a good start. But then you need to have a lawyer review it to make sure you haven't missed something. I even have people if I do a document in my firm, I have someone else look at it, because sometimes you've looked at it too long and you'll miss something. And so you need to have that second set of eyes. And so that if you have a lawyer on a subscription plan like we are, then you've always got that second set of eyes to like, hey, I've looked at this. You might have even highlighted some areas that you're concerned about. Now send it in to the lawyer and let the lawyer look at it, and then come back and say, okay, that's good or not good. You can use that or not. The other the other thing is that a lot of people are signing contracts that they shouldn't be signing. There's just deals that shouldn't happen, but they don't understand the agreement, or they don't even take time to read the agreement and just move forward blindly. We litigated a case in April of 22 for a client that had written his own contract. He'd violated one of the major rules of business that I call it stay in your lane. He went outside of his lane and changed his business model for one customer and did his own agreement. And within the first week of doing this work for the client, got sideways, and the project went way sideways. And it was an $85,000 project. Both sides on that case ended up spending between $130 and $150 in attorney's fees each over this $85,000 contract over 3 years. We won the case, but a win when you don't have a good contract, because it didn't have an attorney's fees clause in it, was that you got to leave without having to pay anybody. So you spend $130,000 to win. So you got to have good contracts, because if you have to go defend them, you need to have some provisions in there that make it where you get your money back for doing so.
Oddly enough, in this specific case that I highlighted, the individual that was suing the client, our client in this particular case, he hadn't read through his entire contract. He had just clicked and signed it, and kind of admitted to that in the questioning. And that's why the judge kind of tossed this case in favor of my client, was because he didn't read his contract. He didn't understand what provisions were maintained in that contract, and where where any legal precedent should be taking place, which was the questioning of this specific court case. And had you read it's amazing to me how. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't read all my contracts, but I at least read the parts that I know that I should be reading to make sure I understand the provisions of the contract. But it's amazing to me how many people enter into contracts and don't understand what the contract is. And then they try and figure something out in the long run, and then they're kind of SOL. I can't. It's really quite amazing to me.
Yeah, I didn't understand it for a long time until it's just the pace of business is fast and things are happening fast. And now with digital, where you're scrolling through it, it's made it even easier not to read it, because they're directing you to initial here, sign, and then it's done. It's just really easy to ignore it and everything's going to be okay. And that's just not true. The courts are full of people that thought everything was going to be okay. So you really need to take the time if it's a deal that there's some deals that you've just got to have. Like, I've got to have certain software for my business, and I'm going to take that no matter what the license agreement is. I just got to have it.
Yeah.
But if it's something that you don't have to have, there's an alternative, then make sure that you've read it and understand what you're getting into, because sometimes you can't get out. And I make mistakes too. Like, I'll sign deals that I sometimes regret. And so you want to make sure that you understand what you're getting into, because it's one thing to regret it, and you knew it was coming because you knew there was a provision in your contract. But it's another thing to get into the middle of a contract to go, this isn't working for me, I want out. And then you find out that it auto-renewed on you, and you're in for another year because you hadn't read it to know that it had the auto-renewal clause. So there's just stuff in there that you just got to be careful of. And it's much easier if you have a team of people helping you keep track of that stuff. It's just very hard to do that yourself.
Yeah. Again, I think a lot of times it's accounting attorney. It's one of those shortcuts that people just view as an expense without a direct ROI tied to it, that make them hesitant to pay the fee to have it be done correctly the first time. And I think you just mentioned a key piece, which I'll kind of highlight here towards the end. You mentioned this team, right? Every entrepreneur, every investor, every business owner needs to have these key members of the team. I was very excited for this conversation because you and I play a pivotal role in the execution and the success of our clients. But a lot of our clients, again, they don't ever establish this team of a financial consultant, an accountant, an attorney to help them make sure that their business is not only going to be successful, but the foundation is set up correctly. And I think that was highlighted very, very clearly in this conversation. And what a great conversation it was. I appreciate it, Scott. Any
It's been fun.
two things, any final thoughts? And then one, if people want to get a hold of you, I know we'll have your information, your social media links, your contact information in the show notes, but again, any last minute thoughts, and then how can people work with you?
Yeah, I mean, all the stuff we've talked about, we've hit on the major things with really with tax side and the legal side, and they work so closely together. You need to have a team of individuals, and that means you need people that can work well together. So when you're adding a professional to your team, make sure they're someone that could play well with others and will talk and is willing to consider other options. Because if they're inflexible and recalcitrant and not fun to deal with, you won't deal with them. You won't. And if they aren't going to work well with others, then they can't help you. So make sure that you're finding people that really want to be a part of this team and see the value in the accountant and the lawyer and the business coach and the finance and the financial person and the insurance. They should all be able to talk to each other so you can keep working and they're solving problems for you while you're making money.
And make sure you know what it's going to cost. Make sure you know what each one of them is going to charge.
Yeah, get the upfront, know how you're going to pay them so that as you use them, there's no surprises. That's very true. The easiest way to get a hold of me probably is on Instagram at the Scott Reib, and we're releasing reels all the time with legal tips like we've talked about today. And then we'll have a landing page just for your listeners. So it'll be at Reiblaw, REIBLAW.com//Slackin Off. And on that page, you'll be able to schedule a free session with me where we'll spend 20 minutes diving into what you're doing in the world and how I could possibly protect it. And then you can also download my ebook, Is Your Business Shatterproof, to just run through and see if you're on the right track. But we would love to be a part of your journey. And Brady, thanks for having me on. It's been fun.
Yeah, no, again, I appreciate you, Scott. Thank you. And the partnership is always fun to work with. There's every so often there's people who I personally promote, who I personally work with. And Scott is one of those individuals. He does a fantastic job for me and my teams and our businesses. So again, if you do have questions, at Scott Reib on Instagram, again, like I mentioned, his contact information and social media links will be in the show notes. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please let us know. Give us a comment, give us a review. If you didn't like today's show, give us a comment, give us a review. We're always trying to improve. And if you have anything in particular that you'd like to listen or hear about, let us know, and we'll find the guest who's an expert in that area. Again, thanks for listening. This is another episode of Slackin Off. Keep slacking off. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to Slackin Off with Brady Slack.